Let's talk about the best books I read in 2021. I realize this video is a bit late. Most people have had this shit up since the end of December. I take a while to get all of my videos up, but I'm excited to talk about these books. I feel like honestly, if you've been around this channel a minute, you probably already know what the top couple are, but regardless, I have a top 10 and let's talk about it. Hopefully there will be at least a couple of surprises. We're counting down from 10 to 1, and coming in at number 10 is In Order to Live by Yeonmi Park. I feel like every year I read at least one or two nonfiction books that just really hit me and stick with me, and this was definitely the book for 2021. This chronicles the life of Yeonmi Park and her family when they defected from North Korea. I'm not the type of person who has spent a ton of time delving into foreign politics. It's definitely something I'm getting more and more interested in, especially this past year. But this was really my first good hard look at a country that isn't my own, or at least isn't in North America. And it was extremely eye-opening. I knew next to nothing about the living conditions in North Korea, and I feel like Yeonmi Park did such a good job at really showing just how bleak the situation was for the everyday people. The economy in North Korea is so low that families are starving. They are having to sell their feces to the government in order to use as manure. Government means everything. And if you hear anyone talking bad about the government, even your spouse, even your parent, you're supposed to report on them. And then they will be sent away to basically a slave labor camp. And there's no real way of knowing when they'll ever get out of that situation. The decision to defect is basically left in Yeonmi Park's hands, despite the fact that she is only like 13 years old. And their escape is quite harrowing and terrifying, because if they get sent back to North Korea, they know they're in shit. They know that they're going to get sent to these labor camps and they're never going to be able to get out. And that leaves them in a very vulnerable situation, because if they're sent in to a country that allies with North Korea, then they're obviously going to get sent back. So they have to kind of fly under the radar and make money in a way that the government will not see, which of course leads to some very dark, shady places like sex trafficking. This book really explored just how horrible this journey was, but how much even worse it could be. She definitely saw a lot through other people who were experiencing the same thing as she was. And it follows her journey all the way through the ups and downs. She eventually gets to the US, and she is a very outspoken advocate now for the conditions of North Korea. She's shed a lot of light on the situation that I think not a ton of people are able to know about, because we're just so disconnected from these types of countries because they will not let communications in or out. It was just a very informative book, and one that I would absolutely recommend to anyone who just wants to know more about a situation that they probably are never going to experience for themselves. Coming in at number 9 is The Venue by TJ Payne. This was such a fun ride. This is a very short horror novel about a bride and groom who decide to hold their wedding at this place called The Venue. This place is very secretive and very expensive. It's like up in the Alps somewhere, very secluded, where all these people who are coming, all their guests that they've invited, they all basically have to go in blindfolded, not knowing where they are. They have to give up their cell phones. They're strapped in to some sort of device, and they're told that they have to fight each other to the death. Once they kill someone, they can go free. If they try to escape in any other way, then that device on their wrist is going to blow them up. You could try cutting your arm off, but that probably won't go well for you. I loved this so much. It was just so much fun. I like a horror novel that is a little bit grotesque but doesn't take itself too seriously. The characters in this, especially of the bride and groom, were just so over the top. And once again, like, I kind of love that. I don't need everything to be rooted in reality, and this definitely wasn't. This follows much in line with the rich white people be crazy genre of horror, much like Ready or Not, and it still had some things that felt authentic to real life. Like, there were some caricatures in this that I think were played with really well, especially the groom. The groom very much feels like this sort of sad, pathetic incel who really hates this woman who he feels like rejected him, even though he was quote-unquote such a nice guy to her. And we're following her footsteps. She is our point of view into the story. She comes to this wedding having not talked to him for a very long time and kind of wondering why her and her family were even invited. But she goes along thinking this is an all-expenses-paid vacation to Switzerland, why the hell not? And of course, slowly starts to realize what a mistake she's made. If you love a battle royale, if you just want something with some fun kills, I think this is a great one to pick up. Now the next two books on my list are both teen thrillers that were really a cut above any teen thrillers I've ever read. Number 9 is Ace of Spades by Faridah Àbíké-Íyímídé. This follows our two main protagonists who both go to this very prestigious, expensive boarding school where they are the only two black students. Our female character is the best of the best. She wants to be the top of the class, you know, the head girl, whereas our male student is, you know, just kind of getting along. Just your regular student who is interested in maybe some dorkier things. He's not the most popular guy in school, not like the female character. They don't necessarily run in the same circles. And yet, all of a sudden, they both start to seemingly be picked on by this anonymous character who wants to spill all their secrets. Think Pretty Little Liars, except a million times better. I really enjoyed the shit out of this. I listened to this in one sitting, I'm pretty sure, and I fell in love with these characters. That's where this book really shines. I mean, I love the mystery aspects as well, but I think the fact that this focused on two characters who each very much had their own personalities and who you come to know so well, you respect them, you like them, you care about them, and there's never any part in the story where I wish I would go to the other perspective. I was invested in both of them equally. It's so rare to see a teen novel like this, especially a thriller, with such well-defined, well-fleshed-out characters. Both these characters had romantic interests and romantic plot lines, but it never took over the novel. It was important to who they were as characters, it was important to the story, without becoming the story. Or without becoming a huge distraction or irritation. And then there's the mystery, which I felt like just built so nicely on each other as it went, and the ending was just, it was beautiful. It was so well constructed, it was so well explained and defined. Everything about it made sense in a super unsettling, unfortunate way. Obviously it says a lot about society, and it was just so authentic and perfect. It was such a good thriller. The other teen thriller that I love this year, coming in at number 7, was All These Beautiful Strangers by Elizabeth Klehfoth. Really, Ace of Spades and this one could go either way because I enjoyed both of these just so much. This one I think I enjoyed just a touch more because I liked how morally gray the main character in this one is. In this book we are following our main character who goes to, once again, a very prestigious boarding school. She gets involved with this secret society at the school who is asking her to perform tasks that she's not quite sure if she should be performing. At first it seems like it's all fun and games until it starts escalating to a place that is not so fun. Then there's also the fact that her mother went missing many years ago and she's never found out what happened, as well as an old murder at the school that took place. There's a lot that this book is trying to juggle, and I think it does it all really well, which is extremely impressive. As I mentioned before, this main character is very morally gray. You don't necessarily think she is the best person or making the best choices. You don't necessarily like her, but I always found her interesting. And I always found her authentic. She has so much privilege, and it's like she's just finding that out throughout the story. And I think that's really my favorite thing about this novel is the way it handles privilege. It just feels so realistic and like subtly scathing. Another instance where I really liked the way the romantic storyline played out, not because I liked the romantic interest, but because I liked what it had to do in the story. The guy that she's into also has a ton of privilege, and because of how hot he is and how much of a top dog he is at school, he gets away with a lot more than he should. And she's only noticing that throughout the story as it goes, after letting him get away with stuff with her as well. I loved the way that that storyline progressed and evolved as she came to realize certain things about herself and about the world she inhabited. It was definitely a coming-of-age story and trying to decide who she wanted to be, and I just thought everything played out so perfectly. Number 6 is the Scholomance series by Naomi and Novik. I never would have guessed this would be here on this list. I was not expecting to love this, especially after all the bad reviews I saw, but I completely fell in love with this main character, and her relationship with the male love interest just completely won me over in the most ridiculous ways. This is a series about a magical school that's trying to kill its magical students. This setting is literally non-stop. These monsters are constantly trying to kill. And when I say that the school is trying to kill them, I mean constantly trying to kill them. There is not a second to sit down and just relax. They are always on guard. And because of that, you really need friends. You need people to have your back, because otherwise you're not making it out that's alive. Unfortunately for our main character, she has a really hard time making friends. She has a power that is often considered very dark and very evil. She's very scared to let the people around her know just how powerful she is, and there's this fine line that she has to walk of showing that she has some power, that she has value, that other people should want to add her to their team. But she's too afraid to show them just how much power she has or just how dark her power is, because she thinks that they will be afraid of her. On top of that, she doesn't exactly have a winning personality, so when we start the book, she really has no friends, and we kind of see her start to make those friends along this journey. She also ends up kind of reluctantly paired up with the school hero. He is also a bit of a loner, even though everybody wants to be his friend, because he is literally the monster killer in the school. He has saved pretty much everyone in the school at one point or another, but especially our main character. He has saved her time and time again, and that just pisses her off to no end. I loved their reluctant relationship, the way that she would just like treat him like crap, and he just kept coming back for more because he doesn't even notice it. He doesn't care that she treats him like crap. He's actually in a way kind of appreciative of it, because she's the only person who doesn't kiss his ass. She's the only person who isn't trying to use him to get ahead. He gives off just a little bit of a himbo vibe, and I love that she gets to be the powerful one in this relationship. Yes, he is powerful in his own right, but in very different ways. He saves her in many instances, but she gets to save him in other instances as well. I think they are very well matched, very well balanced. I love her scathing remarks and just like her vibe. I'm all about it. I totally understand what it's like to not be great at making friends, but also kind of just hating people, so you're not even necessarily sure if you want those people around you. I think the setting is really fun, and because I listened to the audiobooks, I never got bogged down in the exposition. I can totally see everybody's criticisms of the novels, because yeah, it explains the crap out of everything. It will go off on tangents, just on like little details that you really don't need to know. But because I was listening to it on audiobook, I actually appreciated all those details. I never really noticed that it was going off on tangents. I've read the first 2 books, the 3rd book isn't out yet, but I cannot wait to read more of this story. I think it's really interesting to read a book that could be a villain's origin story, but is instead the story of a girl who is trying really, really hard not to be the villain, despite society telling her that she already is. Number 5 on this list is Nevermore series by Jessica Townsend. Now, I've only read the first 2 in this. I know the 3rd book's out, but I have not been able to get it on ebook form yet. It's not at my library, and it's too expensive for me to buy the ebook because I know I'm gonna want a physical copy afterwards. It's just, you know, it hasn't happened yet, but it will. This is about our main character, Morgan Crow, who, because of the day she was born on, she is now cursed and blamed for everything that has gone wrong in her town. Now, because she has a cursed child, she is fated to die on her 11th birthday. But before that can happen, somebody swoops in and whisks her off to the land of Nevermore, where she has to compete for a spot at this magical school. I just loved getting these little details of this world. I feel like this walked a fine line of being whimsical enough for children, but not being overly so, not being too childish for an adult to read, obviously. This really opened up an entire new reading experience for me, because I never thought I would enjoy a middle grade book, and I adored this. I loved the relationship between Morgan and Jupiter. I just thought it was so special and lovely. I love getting to know all the different children that she goes to school with and all their different abilities, getting to see the politics of the world, see what this like evil mastermind has in plan, or maybe if that will change in some way. I love Morgan's attitude. You know, she's got a little bit of sass, and that's a girl after my own heart. Nothing here is too sunshines and rainbows. There's definitely some messaging within the book about treating people kindly, but it doesn't beat you over the head. It's not an after-school special level of message or lesson. It's just enough to be perfect for children while still being accessible for adults. I love the way the details are being explored and given to us. It's not too much. We're not getting tons of exposition dumped on us, but it's just enough to tickle your imagination. I really just can't wait to read more in this series. Now, number 4 on this list is Moon of Crusted Snow by Waubgeshig Grice. This story is about an Anishinaabe community that suddenly loses their power. They live in a very secluded, remote community, and so they believe that when the electricity goes off, that it will probably come back on at some point. This is not something they haven't experienced before, and so at first they really try not to panic. But of course, over time, things start to break down, especially when an outsider comes in and tries to take over. This was such a slight novel, and yet it managed to do so much. It managed to just ratchet up the tension slowly but surely. Like, it worked so well for me. This is one of the first books that had dream sequences that I didn't hate. I love how this author shows us who these characters are. We don't have to be spoon-fed which side of these situations to be on. We just get to watch and witness, and that's weirdly rare in books, I find. It's not as easy to do as in different forms of media. The sense of community that was there and the way it gets fractured by this outsider, as well as just the differing points of view within the community by the generations. They definitely talk about kind of the older generation and the way they live off the land, whereas the new generation is used to having electricity, used to having things a little bit easier because they have food they can go buy from the supermarket. They don't have to go out and catch and kill. I thought I brought up a lot of interesting discussions about the way colonizers have pushed them further and further away from this land and into smaller, remote areas, and taught them to rely on these offerings of goods and services, and what happens when these colonizers suddenly decide to take that all away. You know, can you rely on your community? Especially when someone else comes in and tries to fracture that. I just thought this book did so many things in so few pages, and it was so impressive, immersive, and palpable. And so that's why it's my number 4. Now we're getting into the top 3, and this is, for me, like, the books that stand above the rest. My top 3 favorite things I've read this year that I will probably go back and read again and again, that I think about over and over again this year. Like, these are it. Number 3 on that list is The Good Girl's Guide to Murder series by Holly Jackson. Is anybody surprised? I have talked about this in endless videos lately, and here I am. I'm gonna do it again. I'm gonna do it with a damn smile on my face because I love these books so much. They are just my teen detective loving heart's dream. These books are about our main character Pip, who decides to investigate some mysteries in her town. It starts off as a school project in the first book because there is a girl who once went missing and a boy who was thought to have murdered her because he committed suicide and left a note saying he did, and of course everyone wrapped up the case and said it was solved. But she doesn't believe that that is true. So she takes this opportunity to really delve in and start interviewing people and going back and trying to retrace what really happened all those years ago. The second book takes on a different case involving a friend's missing brother, and then there is a different case in the third book as well. I adored everything about this series, but most of all, I absolutely loved the character progression throughout the series. I think book 1 and book 3 are very different Pips because she goes through a lot in these 3 books, and it does such a good job at showing female rage, at showing the PTSD she's dealing with, the trauma she's gone through. I love the way it looks at rape culture, at sexual assault against women, and the way we don't take it seriously. I don't necessarily always love the conclusions to the mysteries. I don't think the mysteries are quite the part that Holly Jackson does the best. I think what she does great is the character work. I love our main character. I love her interactions with her family, who are just very supportive but also scared for her because she is getting involved in something that is so serious and dangerous. I've said it before, like, I love Veronica Mars, but I do sometimes feel like we don't get a good enough look at the vulnerable side of her, whereas in this, we get to see all of who this character is, her vulnerabilities as well as her tough side. Like, she is hurt by the things she has gone through, but she is still going to go through it because it is what is right. I love the relationship she gets in. The way he calls her Sarge, I loved their dynamics in the first book and the way it grew and how he became her rock and like her steady place. So cute. I enjoyed the fractures in her friend dynamic. I thought that was really realistic, and the way you kind of, as you grow up, you realize just the different values you have with the people that you thought you knew. Everything about the series has my heart, and I know that it is super popular here and that everybody's probably already read it, but if you haven't yet, I absolutely implore you to pick it up. Number 2 on this list is The Push by Ashley Audrain. I have a feeling this will be on a lot of people's top 10 lists this year because this was such a damn good thriller. This follows our main character who has a very shaky relationship with her daughter. She can't figure out whether or not it's her fault as a mother, if she just has postpartum depression, if she's failing her daughter in some way, or if her child may actually be evil. Ashley Audrain did such a good job at opening up different possibilities within the story. You truly didn't know if it was just PTSD. You truly didn't know if the child had actually done something. It could have gone any way. The way she weaved together different parts of this character's past, of the relationship between her and her mother, and then her mother's mother before her, the intergenerational difficulties in female relationships. Postpartum depression is such a big thing that women don't talk about, and so I really liked the way it was approached in this book and the fact that it was such a potent possibility and they did talk about it. There were, of course, moments of exasperation with the husband for not getting it, but then I feel like there were also moments where he would open up in the way that he feels like she's failing their daughter and he just loves their daughter so much, and why can't she? I spent a good portion of the book kind of hating this person because it truly felt like she just wasn't trying hard enough with her daughter. She also writes out these tiny horrific details that really worm its way into your brain, just about pregnancy and motherhood and womanhood. And the way the tension builds up and comes to a head, and then we still get to continue the story on and deal with the repercussions of what happens. I love stories like that. I want to see the consequences of that big moment. And I love that we got that here. And yes, the book does leave off on a little bit of an open ending, although I definitely know how I feel about what happened and what I think happened, but you will obviously have to make up your mind for yourself if you decide to pick this one up. It is definitely a truly amazing debut book. I absolutely cannot wait to see what this writer puts out next. And my number 1 favorite book that I read in 2021 was another debut, and that was The 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle by Stuart Turton. This book was just perfect for me. I love a Groundhog Day type story where the character has to live through the same day over and over again and figure out what's wrong. I love a story where you have to switch bodies. This 1920s jazz age opulence of it all, Agatha Christie type murder situation. I mean, this book has everything. This follows our main character who wakes up in this mansion not knowing who he is or why he's here, how he got here, what's going on. And as the night goes on, he sees a woman get murdered. And then he wakes up in a different body and has to live all of it all over again. He is told by this plague doctor figure that he has to figure out who has murdered Evelyn Hardcastle and tell him before the night ends. But he has 7 different opportunities, 7 different bodies to do so. In order for this book to work, everything had to be perfectly woven together. And it was so impressive to read. Like, your mind has to be on at all times because there is just so many details to take in. The different ways that these characters interact with each other as he comes in and out of consciousness and swaps bodies and lives through the same day over and over. I loved that. And I thought the detail about the way these different personalities interacted with his emotions and his decision making, I love that so much. Like, I thought that was such a smart and clever thing to include. I can't believe this hasn't been made into a movie yet because, like, I mean, what are you waiting for? This was made for, like, a nerdy pop culture lover like me. I thought the ending would let me down because I was like, how can any of this be made sense of? What can you do with this to explain how all of this is happening? And somehow Stuart Turton did that shit. He did it in a way that was thought-provoking, it had nothing to do with the story before it, and yet had so much to say. I loved it so much. I would read a million more versions of this. If he wanted to make sequels, I would eat that shit up. I honestly can't say for sure, but this might be my favorite book ever. I have not read his second novel, but like, I am dying to, because how? How could you possibly top this? And as a debut novel, I cannot wrap my head around it. And that was the best book I read in 2021. Those are my top 10 books of last year. My reading in 2021 wasn't the best overall, but like, this list has my heart. I absolutely adore every single book on this list, and I hope you found something that you want to read from it. And I hope you like this video, and I hope you come back on soon. Bye.